Okay, let's dive right in. We all think we know the story of humanity's journey to the stars, right? A triumph of science and reason. But if you take a deeper look at the source material, a very different story starts to emerge, one that's been hiding in plain sight this whole time. So let's start with the most iconic moment in all of space exploration, the Apollo 11 moon landing in 1969. You can picture it, right? That grainy image, those famous words broadcast across 250,000 miles of empty space. But what if I told you the very first liquid ever poured on the moon wasn't for some scientific experiment? The source material points to this really strange series of events that happened just moments before Neil Armstrong made that famous first step. So inside the lunar module, Buzz Aldrin, who was a Presbyterian elder, performs the first ever religious ceremony on the moon. He actually pours communion wine from this tiny silver chalice. But get this, it goes deeper. Aldrin was also a 33rd degree Freemason. That's the highest rank you can get. And he brought a special Masonic flag with him. He even got permission to charter a brand new Masonic lodge right there on the moon. So you have to ask, was this just a personal act, or was it part of something much, much bigger? And this really highlights a strange duality that, according to the source, is baked into the very foundations of rocketry itself. So let's take a look at the pioneers who made all of this possible. So meet Jack Parsons. This guy was a self-taught genius who co-founded the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, JPL. On the one hand, as you can see here, he was a brilliant scientist, pioneering the solid rocket fuel that would change modern aviation. But on the other hand, he was a high-ranking occultist, a devotee of the infamous Aleister Crowley, and he led a magic lodge right out of his mansion in Pasadena. A man of two worlds, to say the least. And the thing is, the source claims he didn't really separate these two worlds at all. In fact, it said he would actually recite occult hymns, like this one to the god Pan, during official rocket tests. He genuinely believed he was channeling some kind of non-human intelligence to make sure the rockets didn't blow up. His most infamous ritual was called the Babylon Working. It was this incredibly complex attempt to essentially rip open a doorway to another dimension. And his partner in crime for this? None other than L. Ron Hubbard, the guy who would later go on to found Scientology. Now, the ritual ended pretty badly for Parsons. Hubbard actually took off with his girlfriend and all his money, but Parsons himself believed he'd made contact. And here's where it gets really weird. The source points out that in the years right after this ritual, reports of flying saucers just exploded across America. Coincidence? Maybe. But Jack Parsons wasn't the only controversial character shaping the future of spaceflight. The source material points to a whole other and much darker mystical influence that got absorbed directly into the American space program. You see, the highest levels of the Third Reich, and we're talking especially about SS leader Heinrich Himmler, were deeply, deeply invested in paganism, mysticism, and these grand quests for mythical artifacts like the Holy Grail. This wasn't just some fringe belief. It was basically a state-sponsored project. So, after the war, the US government kicks off this secret mission called Operation Paperclip. The goal? Bring the top Nazi scientists to America to get a leg up on the Soviets. They completely scrubbed their war records and put them straight to work on America's most secret and sensitive projects. And the absolute crown jewel of this whole operation was Werner von Braun, a former SS major and the mastermind behind the V-2 rocket program that terrorized London during the war. So let's just connect the dots here, because this is the crucial point. The man who designed and built the Saturn V rocket that took Buzz Aldrin to the moon was the exact same man who built terror weapons for Hitler, using slave labor from concentration camps. So now the US space program is this bizarre mix of American occultists and former Nazi scientists. So, how did this strange brew of people and ideas actually shape NASA? Well, the source suggests it created a kind of hidden blueprint, a code that's embedded in NASA's own symbols and even its mission timing. For example, just take a look at the official Apollo program patch. Okay, the mission is named for Apollo, a Greek god, but the central image is the constellation Orion, and if you look closely, the crossbar of the A for Apollo lines up perfectly with Orion's belt. In ancient Egypt, Orion's belt was the celestial symbol for Osiris, the god of death and rebirth. So, why mix Greek and Egyptian gods? What are they trying to say? And then there's this number, 33. It just keeps popping up in the strangest places. Now, the number 33 is really important. It's the highest degree you can get in Scottish Rite Freemasonry. And according to the source, it is all over NASA's history. Key astronauts like Aldrin and John Glenn were 33rd degree Masons. Critical infrastructure like the launch tower at Pad 33 and the main landing strip at Cape Kennedy, runway 33, they all bear the number. Is that all just a big coincidence? Or is it a deliberate signature? The source also points to this really bizarre pattern in launch timing. JPL's very first successful rocket test? It was on Halloween, the ancient pagan festival of Samhain, a day tied to death and spirits. America's first satellite? Launched right around Imbolc, a festival of new beginnings. And Apollo 8, the first time humans ever orbited the moon, launched on the winter solstice, the symbolic rebirth of the sun. It seems like major milestones just happen to align with these ancient festival dates. And you might think, okay, that's all weird history, but this strange thread continues right into the modern era. The source claims that even today, high-level figures in aerospace are still exploring this link between high technology and something else. I mean, the strange connections just don't stop. We've got Apollo 14 astronaut Edgar Mitchell conducting his own private ESP experiments from the moon. There are stories of directors at Lockheed's legendary Skunk Works, these are the people building our most secret aircraft, inviting an expert to come lecture their top engineers on levitation. And it even cites a high-ranking NASA mission controller who claims he gets technological blueprints as downloads from some non-human intelligence he calls the Lady. And maybe this one quote, which is attributed to a senior NASA mission controller talking to a religious studies scholar, just sums the whole thing up. He said, "The next development in my field, rocket science, will come from yours, religion." I mean, wow. Which leaves us with the ultimate question that this hidden history poses. The takeaway here isn't supposed to be a simple answer. It's meant to give you a whole new lens to look at one of humanity's greatest achievements. So, is the journey to the stars a purely scientific project? Or has there been a parallel, mystical mission hiding in plain sight all along?